At Team Toyota, they've been selling and servicing new and used Toyotas in your community for over 50 years. And you can reserve your next new Toyota with them today. You'll get a realistic timeline, and even in this crazy market, they won't charge you over MSRP. Or don't wait at all. With over 75 certified Toyotas, including a bunch of RAV4 and Highlanders, you can drive one home today. And you can always trust them to maintain your current vehicle. Their service and collision centers are high-tech, comfortable, and will save you time and money. Team Toyota can help you go anywhere you want, but they'll always be your hometown team. Just visit teamtoyota.net and choose from 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Hey folks, welcome to the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Scheidman, he's Ricky Batalico, and the Phillies season ended shortly before anyone around this area would have wanted. It was a sudden finish. I mean, that they brought home that 3-2 NLCS lead, Ricky. It seemed like they were going to finish the job, and we're not going to harp too much on the end of things because it's been discussed ad nauseum already, but this is 2 Octobers in a row where the Phillies have looked dynamite for a couple weeks. And the offense has just gone completely ice cold in the final few games of the season. Last year in the World Series, the Phillies finished the World Series by going 9 for their final 98. And here in the NLCS, we saw all those home runs in the first 3 rounds and in the first 2 games of the series. And then the rest of the way, all we saw was an overly aggressive bunch that Arizona was able to take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this Arizona series, it literally should have ended so much earlier. I think we all know that. And it was almost like Nick Castellanos had a remark, well, I got on that plane to Arizona, I lost it. I mean, I don't understand how that actually happens. But I mean, when you think about it, you're talking about the big money players that you needed to step up, which is what you got these guys for. And they just came up empty. I saw a lot of swings that were almost desperate type swings. Instead of letting the baseball come to you, instead of letting the game come to you, I think they all tried to dictate what was going to happen in the at-bats. And when that happens, you usually have pretty poor at-bats. But for that to happen, I mean, my shock came at Citizens Bank Park. I could understand you going out there losing 2 out of 3, but coming back to Philadelphia and the bats still being cold in Philadelphia, that's where the shock came in for me. And it wasn't just one guy. So it's not like you could just sit back and say, well, you know, Nick went in a slump or so-and-so went in a slump. It was pretty much head to toe for this Phillies team that everybody kind of fell down real quickly and couldn't get back up off of their backs. And that's something that I don't know how you fix that, because you think you've already fixed it in the sense that, you know, you brought in Harper, you brought in Turner, you brought in Schwarber, Casty, Real Muto. You bring in all these guys for that sole purpose that this doesn't happen. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's no real good reason for it. I did not think the Diamondbacks pitching was as formidable as everybody would think. I thought their 8th and 9th inning guys were extremely good. I'm a little shocked they never got to Fott. I thought he was a guy that, especially the second time around, you'd be able to do some damage to after you just saw him. And in my opinion, I think they just became way overly aggressive. And if you look back to last year, I think they ran into a really good pitching staff that was better than them in the Houston Astros. I think this year they ran into themselves. That's what I feel like.
And it's going to be really difficult to swallow for years for Phillies fans because the draw might never be this good as it was this postseason with the Dodgers out, the Brewers out, the Phillies eliminated the Braves. They have this 84-win Diamondbacks team down 2-0 in the series. A Diamondbacks team that, you know, after the first 2 games in Philadelphia, I remember having conversations with a lot of writers or, you know, just baseball people around the ballpark who were making the comment, this team looks like they've already packed it in, talking about the Diamondbacks. They look like they were happy to be here. And the Phillies let them back into that series in games 3 and 4 in Arizona. Yeah. Craig Kimbrell obviously playing a big role. But, you know, just talking about the over-aggressiveness, this is a team that all season long and all month talked about how ready it is for this moment and like how unfazed they are by these pressure spots, having experienced it so much now. But after what we saw in games 3 through 7, and particularly games 6 and 7 at home, the over aggressiveness? Were guys just trying to swing too hard to end this series more quickly? Were they feeling some of the nerves?
I would think so. I mean, anytime you get put in a situation where your backs are against the wall, you're going to feel not necessarily nerves, but a little bit of pressure. And when that happens, you tend to want to be the one. And it sounds weird, but all these guys have been throughout the year. They've all been that one big player that could hit the ball out of the ballpark and change the whole, goings on, I guess, if you look at it. But none of them were able to do that. I mean, Alec Boehm hit a big home run in what was that, Game 7, but that was to no avail. That had really nothing to do with the outcome. The outcome turned into they stopped hitting as a team and they stopped trying to do things. And sometimes, I know this is an old-time cliche, but sometimes you do have to play situational baseball. They did not play it very well in Game 6 or 7. So, I mean, you chalk that up. You just brought up a strange thing about you were talking about the Diamondbacks. It was odd because after Game 1, it was a 5-3 Phillies won. I said, the Diamondbacks aren't phased of this place. I don't think they care about this place. I don't think they even put that in the back of their minds that the fans are on them. And they came out the second game, got beat 10-0. And I was ridiculed for saying that. Well, they came back and proved their point. And I think they had momentum on their side. When you have momentum on your side, everything just kind of changes. And to lose 4 out of 5 to the Diamondbacks, I think it was a little bit embarrassing, if you ask me. And I'm sure some of those players probably felt that. Other players probably just looked in the mirror and said, we didn't play well enough. But I look at it this way. When you look at those two rosters, there's no way this should happen. No way. Mm-mm. So, in my opinion, it's a major blow-up.
It also Citizens Bank Park is a great home field advantage. Playing in front of these fans is a huge benefit when you're the home team versus the visitor. But it also reinforced that there is no such thing as like this perfect fairy tale home field advantage that people started kind of convincing themselves Citizens Bank Park turned into. Look, it's still a great place. It's still one of the most raucous environments you're going to visit in baseball. And I can tell you, having been out at Chase Field for this series as well, that while those fans are into it, it sounded like a game in the middle of June than it did an NLCS game. But teams don't go undefeated at home, the way the Phillies were in the postseason. They don't go 95% of their innings ahead or tied the way the Phillies had for the first few weeks of that playoff run, which also played into the crowd noise. But we saw in those final 2 games, the Diamondbacks scored early. The Phillies had their problems. There was an at-bat in Game 6 that stuck out to me. Trey Turner's first at-bat. He lofted a fly ball to left field, and he kind of stared at it, thought he had it, and it was a harmless fly out to the warning track. The only ballpark in baseball it would have been out of was Minute Maid Park. But just like his process of watching the ball and kind of looking at it, thinking it's going to go over the wall, it just looked like a homer-happy team, a team that was trying to score all of its runs that way because in the first 2 games of the series it worked. They ambushed Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen. They had all those first-pitch homers. And then it's like the Diamondbacks realized, you know what? If they're going to swing out of their shoes on the first pitch, we're going to throw them a breaking ball in the dirt in the first pitch. And guys like JT, Nick Castellanos, Trey Turner in particular, they never adjusted. They never made that adjustment within the series.
Yeah, Brent Strom, the pitching coach for Arizona, came out and said basically what you just said is that, you know what, if they're going to swing like this, we have to make some adjustments. After the second game, they started making some adjustments. And I give a lot of credit to him, Brent Strom, and their scouting department, because that's how they come up with different plans. And you've heard me talk about adjustments. I like to talk about adjustments with pitchers a lot because I think it's harder to make a hitting adjustment in game. But for pitchers, if you can make that adjustment, if you know what you want to do with the baseball and things will change in certain, I guess I'm trying to say certain at-bats. One at-bat may be changed by a certain pitch. They changed their whole pitching thing. They changed their whole scouting report. They changed everything in midstream. And to me, that was the greatest move they could have made. As you saw, a lot of breaking balls on the outside part of the plate that end up balls. A lot of pitches up out of the zone. What were the Phillies doing? Swing, swing, swing. They were in swing mode. You can't always be like that. Sometimes you just got to take what the game dictates. I don't think they did that at all, especially Game 6, Game 7. I think they were trying to be the ones dictating. The other thing is you brought up the home runs, and this just kind of put a light into my head. Early on in the season, they struggle. Is that fair to say, hitting home runs? And then later on in the season, they started struggling after August, at mid-September, kind of started going down a little bit. I'm wondering if the weather has something to do with it. Because you know as well as I do, you've been to Citizens Bank Park in August and July, and that ball just flies out of there.
Well,
but you get to where it's cooler, you really got to hit the ball on the screws.
I was going to say during the Braves series for the NLDS games, it was really nice out, high temperatures. During the NLCS, that was not the case. I think there was also just an element of the Phillies were homering twice a night for like a span of 2.5 weeks. They were slugging the ball to such a high degree that you don't see over like a sustained period during the regular season. The crash was going to come eventually. It just happened for the Phillies, a week earlier than anybody would have expected. And some of it was their own doing with the amount of pitches they chased outside the strike zone. But now just looking at the offensive approach, that swing happy approach, that's the kind of player Trey Turner is. It's the kind of player Castellanos is. It's the kind of player JT Realmuto is. It's the kind of player Alec Bohm is. You have Stott, Harper, and Schwarber who will take their walks. And even Stott didn't take as many pitches this season as he did as a rookie. He was a better hitter overall. But you start to wonder, do the Phillies have enough plate selection in their lineup? Is there a way that they can move forward positively from this and be a better offense? I wonder if it's going to have to take some big transactions, because at his year-end press conference, I asked Dave Dombrowski that question. And he went through the lineup 1 through 9 and pretty much said, this guy's solidified, this guy's solidified. He got to Johan Rojas and he said that he's not anointed as the everyday center fielder, that Rojas will have to earn that because the Phillies need more offense out of that position. But I start to look at other things like, do they explore a Nick Castellanos trade this offseason? A guy who has 3 years left on his contract, had a big home run season, but you're still probably not going to convince another team to take on that full salary. But does that make you a better team if say you bring back a Rhys Hoskins who does have that plate selection? I don't think all of those pieces could fit. I don't think you can bring back both Hoskins and Castellanos. But just in wondering how the Phillies can remove some of the aggressiveness, add some plate selection, it would seem to have to come from getting rid of a popular internal player.
I agree with you. I think something, and I wouldn't call that drastic moves, but I think a bigger type move is coming in the offseason. I don't think you can go back status quo. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't think you could go back as is right now. You've had 2 shots. You've gotten deep both times. Something has to change a little bit. And whether that be a trade, because you got to figure if Bryce is going back out to right field, that's going to probably open up something, unless they put him in left field, which obviously could happen. But there's so many different things that could happen in these games that it's, there's certain situations where you need those type of hitters that'll take some walks, that'll have some discipline at the plate. Nick Castellanos, he's not a disciplined guy. As you said, Turner's not a disciplined guy, but you can't get rid of Trey Turner. There's way too many numbers involved there, way too many years involved there. So, I guess the likely candidate would turn to Nick. And that's not saying he didn't have a great year for the Phillies, because he did. He 106 RBIs. He got the job done. He did a lot of good things for the Phillies. But, to make your team get over that hump, it's usually a move that you have to make. And whether that move is going to be a Nick Castellanos, whether it's going to be a Hoskins, whether it's going to be bringing Aaron Nola back. There are a lot of decisions that have to be made fairly quickly for the Phillies right now, because you got to think if Nola heads into free agency, that money, it's going to go big. I think we all agree with this. There's not many teams out there that are looking there's not a lot of free agent starting pitchers out there, unless you go via a trade with guys on their last year. That's the only other way to do it. But I look at it this way. They have a lot of decisions to make. I think there's going to be a couple of bombshell moves.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they have to trade someone like Castellanos, just that if you start to think about how they can improve and be a different sort of offense, you can't return everybody and think you're going to be a different team. And, it doesn't mean that in 2024 that every opponent is going to come out and attack the Phillies and execute as successfully as the Diamondbacks did. You still have to make those pitches. Like if you throw that fastball that it's not high enough, or the breaking ball, the slider that's not far enough off the plate, a guy might be able to take it the other way. It's not a guarantee that teams are going to be able to execute the way the Diamondbacks were, but it would seem that if the Phillies want a different result late in the year, they're going to have to infuse some other sort of characteristics to this offense. We saw early in October, they were utilizing the stolen base. They were like a multifaceted offense.
Where did that go? You know what I mean? Where did it go? It just disappeared.
Well, that also kind of shows you that stolen bases are all about the opportunities, because early in the series, the talk was about how the Diamondbacks, who were built around the stolen base in the regular season, I think they only had one through the first 5 games. And they were talking about not wanting to risk outs, not needing to pick their spots. Then they get leads in game 6 and 7. They stole 6 bases in those games,
Yeah.
So I think that was all about, the Phillies had more base runners early and they were feeling themselves. They had leads. They were willing to take those risks. But when that goes away, a lot of the other stuff goes away too. And it just didn't seem like this offense was going to go that route. It seemed like this team, for weeks, really, to begin October, they looked so much better than their opponents. And then it just all came crashing down faster than I think any of us were expecting or ready for. And
that's like the biggest surprise to me, because when you have like 5 or 6 guys that each guy individually could carry a team for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden just all of them go flat at once, that never happens. And that's why I said, you looked at that one Trey Turner at bat. I'll look at another one when he tried to bunt for the base hit. That's fine. But then when you get down the count, he has a ball on the outside part of the plate. Just hit it to the right side. Instead, he pulls it to the worst possible place on the field you could, and that was the third baseman, and grounds out the third. I just think, the mental aspect of the game has to continue to play. In the playoffs, in the NLCS, in the World Series, you always have to have that mental aspect clicking. I think it kind of disappeared for some guys, because that's what pressure and that's what those big games kind of does to guys, is that your mind gets a little jumbled at times and you get off of the plan at hand. I think they got out of their plan. That's what I think. I know it's about home runs, but you got to understand what's going on around the field as the game's moving.
Well, there's a lot of moving parts to this Rhys Hoskins conversation, and a lot of it revolves around Bryce Harper, whether he plays first base moving forward, whether he returns to right field, whether he goes to left field, as you said. So there's not like a clear-cut answer with that yet. But Aaron Nola, these guys become free agents the day after the World Series, and then 5 days after the World Series, they can sign with any team. Major ups for Aaron Nola to begin the postseason. There were downs at the end. We saw him run out of gas at the very end last year as well. We've told the story of Aaron Nola so many times on this podcast. Don't need to tell it again. Valuable pitcher, maybe a little bit underrated here. I guess my direct question for you, Ricky, is if it takes 6 years, $150 million, are you re-signing Aaron Nola?
I think Aaron Nola is still a bargain at that. And I know people will look at me kind of funny, but I look at his numbers as a whole. Look at his numbers historically. He's given you innings. He's going to have his ups and downs, but where do you think you're going to find another pitcher that doesn't do that, especially in this year's pool? There's not a lot of guys out there. And Dave Dombrowski said the top of his rotation is a big-time thing that he wants to get done this year. So how else would you do it? You're not going to – number one, you're not going to get a discount from Aaron Nola. So if you're going to pay for him, you're paying the real price. And I don't blame Aaron Nola that he took a discount the first time around, and it did him well. And now he's going to do himself even more well in this next round. But I like him too much to let him go. That's what I can tell you. He gives you innings. He will frustrate you at times. But what is the backup plan?
Right.
I don't see a very good backup plan is the biggest reason why I would re-sign.
So the reason I said 6 for $150 million is because, so last year, Carlos Rodon, 6 years, $162 million. Nola, a better pitcher, more of a track record. I guess the top end version of Rodon might be a little more impressive than the top end version of Nola. But, you also look back, like the Cole Hamels contract of 10 years ago was 6 years, $144 million. At a pretty similar point in the career, Nola, similar sort of postseason success, didn't have quite the World Series Hamels did in 2008. But you look at the suitors, the Cardinals are going to be there, the Braves are going to be there, the Dodgers are going to be there. There are going to be some American League pitching needy teams there. The top of the starting pitching market, you're looking at Aaron Nola, Blake Snell, Sonny Gray. And that's pretty much it. Beyond that, it's a major move down. You have guys like Julio Urias, who's going to be a free agent, but there are legal issues with him with a domestic violence situation.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Don't even put him on the list.
Yeah, so I mean, he's not there anymore. Shohei Ohtani, who would have been in a class of his own, is not going to pitch at all in 2024. So a starting pitching needy team can't look to him either, at least in the immediate future. So there are going to be clubs that make it difficult on the Phillies to re-sign Aaron Nola. But to the point you made, what is the backup plan? If the only backup plan is trading for a starting pitcher and then signing him to a huge deal, then you're looking at getting rid of a good prospect and paying similar money to a pitcher, I guess, that you deem is going to be better moving forward than Nola. But at the end of the day, it might just be simpler and the better plan just to, bring back the starting pitcher that that has had a lot of success for you.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I think they have to work fast because I think your 150 might even be low when he gets out there on the market. I think your 150 is a good number. I think they offer that. At least you get him biting on the bait a little bit. I think they go there. I think Aaron feels special. He feels like, okay, I'm making $25 million a year. That's a good number. Well, what was his mindset? Was he thinking more towards 30? Was he thinking 27, 28? Because look at Scherzer, look at Verlander. I mean, I know their contracts were short, but that's gigantic money that they received. But I look at it this way. If you offer Aaron Nola something that is not going to embarrass him, I think he wants to play in Philadelphia. So I wouldn't say you get a hometown bonus, but you have the heart. You have his heart. So that's one thing you got to remember. You try to treat him as well as you possibly can.
And how much does the age and the workload concern you? So Nola's 30 years old, and dating back to 2018, he's averaged 207 innings per full season, and he's also thrown 50 innings in the playoffs the last two postseasons as well. Many examples over the years of pitchers quickly breaking down at like 31, 32, 33. Do you have confidence that Nola, if they were to sign him to a 5-6 year deal, that you'd be getting a productive pitcher for more than half of that?
I think about half of it. At some point, I mean, you're right. Pitchers break down. At some point, your arm's going to break down. Aaron Nola has very good mechanics. I will say this. So, I mean, generally, you don't really think that about him. But his age will creep up. Yes, I'm sure something would creep up on him with an arm injury or elbow injury or whatnot. But aren't we thinking for the first 3 years? I mean, really? Isn't this really a 3-year, $150 million deal? I mean, when you really think about it, I know you're going to 6 years, but you're really thinking about the first 3 years. So in my opinion, I look at it as, okay, if you're going to pay him, let's win a couple World Series in the next 3 years.
So beyond Nola and Hoskins, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that crazy of an offseason for the Phillies. They've spent a lot of money in recent years. Trey Turner, 11 years, $300 million an offseason ago. There's not going to be another one of those signings this winter, I don't think. And Dave Dombrowski, talking to reporters the other day, he was asked if he thinks that this club can contend as is currently constructed. And he pretty much said that as long as they take care of the starting pitching opening with Nola, he thinks this team can come back, win more than 90 games, and compete for a World Series again. So just reading between the lines, it doesn't seem like there's going to be major activity, maybe some bullpen moves here and there. I think the Phillies need to have a better bench than they had this season.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. You need some fear of somebody coming off that bench. You think the Diamondbacks feared Jake Cave coming off the bench? Or, I mean, the one guy that you kept on the bench the most that I thought could have done some damage was Edmundo Sosa. He is your one guy off the bench that I kind of trusted more than anybody else. What did he do? Sat on the bench for most of the playoffs. So, I mean, I understand with the DH, there's not a lot of moving around of guys on the bench. But the one thing you do need is some kind of fear. In 2008, the Phillies had Matt Stairs. That's fear. You know what I'm saying? There's always something that could instill fear in somebody else if they make the wrong move with the bullpen guys. And I believe there's going to be probably one or two bullpen guys brought in. I think you keep most of your bullpen as is. I do not believe Craig Kimbrell will be back. But for the most part, I think you keep everything status quo. You fill in what you need to fill in, and you fill up. But the one thing you really got to do is the right field situation, first base situation, get that taken care of in Aaron Nola. That's it.
Yeah, I highly doubt Kimbrel will be back, and I would expect the Phillies to address that by bringing in another right-handed high-leverage late-inning reliever,
Yep.
whether that guy closes or whether it's Jose Alvarado or some sort of mixture next year. The Phillies do need another big-time late-inning right-handed pitcher because, I didn't see enough out of Orion Kerkering to think that he's going to be ready yet to be a setup man every single night or, every other night for 6 months. The Phillies have gone that route, bringing in veteran relievers to pair with their homegrown guys. And I think that'll be the case again. Beyond Hoskins, Nola, and Kimbrel, their only other free agent is Michael Lorenzen, who seems like a guy who's going to test the market and go find an opportunity to start elsewhere. Makes you think back to the trade deadline. Did the Phillies do enough? They brought in Michael Lorenzen. They brought in Rodolfo Castro, who made no impact with his team. Lorenzen did make an impact.
The thing that was odd is you got a guy like Lorenzen, and then, you're sitting him for long periods of time after his no-hitter. You're sitting him. You're not really using him in the playoffs. To me, I just don't understand. Is what it really comes down to.
Yeah, that one I still don't totally understand either. I get a lot of the rationale and explanations that we hear from Rob Thompson as to why he made this move or why he didn't make this move. I didn't get that one. I asked him several times about it in October. What does Lorenzen have to do to put himself on the radar as a setup man? Didn't you guys get him with the idea that in October you could shift him from starter to reliever because the experience he had setting up from 2016 to 19? And Thompson said there just wasn't enough opportunity to get him in the games as a reliever down the stretch in the regular season to feel comfortable. But that's on them. That's on them for not finding those opportunities for Michael Lorenzen because, he came in late in the NLCS, pitched an inning and a third, quick, efficient. That's how he was most of the season. I know that his final 5 starts after the no-hitter were not good, but the majority of the year, Michael Lorenzen was getting early soft contact, and it was just odd that he was never an option in the 4th or 5th inning of a game. It always had to be Jeff Hoffman, which then reduced his availability for later in games, and that ripple effect, you see it.
I just think with Lorenzen, what it really came down to is he wasn't pitching well after that no-hitter. I think, in all honesty, I think it came down to performance, not necessarily getting him out to the bullpen and pitching him in certain situations because he's been there, done that. So I look at it this way. What was the real reason? Well, he flat out just wasn't pitching well enough. That's what they were thinking.
Yeah, and the Phillies could have used another high quality right-handed arm late in games because Kerkering and Kimbrel really hurt them in the middle of that series and helped open the door back for Arizona. So we'll see what the offseason holds. Big questions like Nola and Hoskins and how they improve this team for 2024. A team that's still going to have World Series aspirations, will still have short odds to win it all. And we'll see how the Phillies respond. Thanks a lot for listening to this Phillies Talk podcast. We'll have them throughout the offseason. He's Ricky. I'm Corey. We'll catch you later.